I just got finished watching that McKinney, Texas pool party thing, that little incident that took place there with the 14-year-old girl, just literally just a few minutes ago, maybe 4 or 5 minutes ago. And it's put me in a mood where I don't know anymore. I don't know how much more that can be said, that needs to be said. I was trying to get out from under my little technical difficulties so I could get back to trying to wrap up this whole thing about this so-called police brutality, and of course trying to play an even-handed as best as I could to explain that no, it's not always the police, it's not always their fault, it's not always them with the problem. There are extenuating circumstances that are involved in a lot of these instances, which result into them either overreacting or appearing to overreact. And you can gauge that a little bit more appropriately if you have at least some working knowledge of what's involved with police work, what stresses that they're under, what their proper procedures are. Again, not saying that they don't go beyond the limitations that their job title is supposed to allow them, but I'm just speechless. I can't keep doing this, which is pretty much why I just want to wrap this whole thing up anyway. I wanted to do the wrap up as sort of a call to attention to how people's perceptions really need to be put in check as far as determining whether or not the police are bad guys, or whether they're in the wrong, or whether they're exerting more authority than that's allowed them. And I've stated enough times and clearly enough that I would hope that these relatively recent incidents, the ones which I've been more or less focusing upon, the ones which have also been getting the widest news coverage, that in these instances I pretty much laid out there that procedurally and as far as their personal restraint is concerned, that yes, the officers involved in these particular instances did kind of step out of line. But at the same time, I'm trying to explain to people, like, look, you wouldn't have to worry about the police officers stepping out of line like that if we took some responsibility of our own to actually prevent such things from occurring. But as a result, we make heroes out of people who do not deserve to be treated as heroes, just so that we can lash out and cause a big stink over some perceived police brutality. And I understand that our history has a lot to do with that. We haven't always been on the best of terms with police in this country. That's a historical fact, and in certain situations, it's still a fact. But I'm trying to point out that in this 21st century, people have to be mindful of what they're doing, including people of authority. Now that we've got things like the internet and cell phones that can take video or surveillance out the wazoo, everybody's on candid camera nowadays. An environment like this, people have to be on their best behavior, or they have to be on some degree of self-restraint, or anything that gets called into question about their behavior. We're in a situation that we're just not able to just have this hearsay, their word versus my word sort of a thing, that we can actually look at evidence for ourselves. But our problem is when we're presented with the evidence, because we're on an agenda kick, we want to ignore the evidence, or we want to gloss over it, or we want to try to distort it in some sort of a way to make it seem as though that this isn't what really happened. Our eyes are lying to us, our ears are lying to us. That's the attitude that we want to take. So agenda frauds never well, actually they do prosper. That's the problem. That's why I'm saying that, look, we get this agenda fraud kick out of our brains, start looking at things realistically, start looking at things honestly, treating everything with the respect that it deserves, we would not have half the problems that we have in this country, or, to bring it back home, as a race of people. But because we want to be agenda frauds, there we go. We just take whatever and do whatever with it, whatever's going to work in our benefit, or so we perceive. And yeah, it might even look like that in theory, but again, in actual practice, you might be doing something that you think is going to actually benefit you, but all it's really doing is just digging you deeper down a hole that you can never dig yourself back out of. So here we go again. Now there's this pool party thing that I kind of knew about it for about a week or two or so ago. I heard something about it. Wasn't interested. I had other things in my mind I wanted to focus on, whatnot. But I'm not exactly sure how I came across it this time again, searching for something else for another project that I'm working on. And here it is. And so I decided, okay, what's the hoopla about? Because I heard the interview from the one girl that, of course, when she got on camera and she was telling her side of the story, what do these niggas do? It's talking about, well, those titties are on point. Oh, I would just love to squeeze on them. Dude, she's trying to talk about something about some incident that took place that happened. And yet, here all these niggas coming out of the woodwork talking about titties. You know, damn what the woman was trying to talk about. Forget the fact that she had a brain in her head, that she was trying to explain what was going on in the community or what led to this, that, or the other. Nope, the focus was them big titties. And there's what I say again, our downfall as a black race. Our men are too wrapped up and are too laser focused on boobs and breasts and badonks and, oh, that mama's got it, you know. Sex has been the downfall of the African American community. I've said it more than once. And as long as we let sex be our slave master, then we're never going to advance to anything of any sort of real greatness, except for maybe the nerds and the geeks. But of course, they're nerds and geeks, so they don't count, they don't matter. And oops, no, they went and got themselves a white person for their soulmate. Oh, see, that's what happens when they go out and they start getting some popularity, they start getting some money, and they go and they leave the community, they don't bring the resources back to the community, and they all this, and they're going to be something else, and they're going to breed out the race, and well, what do you expect? So here's just another call for, I don't even know what to call it anymore, but to get back on track. So here's this thing about this whole incident with the pool party. And I decided to watch that, and I watched a little entire documented video of the whole thing and trying to see whatever, because everybody's focusing on, he slammed that 14-year-old white girl, and he put his knees in her back, and she didn't do nothing, and she was, and they're pulling guns on swimsuits, and I'm like, did anybody bother to see the entire video? Correction. Did anybody bother to watch the entire video? Because see, that's our problem. We see too much, but we don't watch anything. We don't pay attention to things, and we don't do it objectively. We always have to come at it with whatever supports my agenda. And then you wonder why police act like brutish monsters around us, or why they don't ever look forward to coming into our community, trying to clean up our mess so that those of us who are the few decent, reasonable ones can actually breathe a little bit easier because somebody's out there cleaning up our riffraff because we won't do it ourselves. So here's this situation. Pool party, the story behind the whole thing. Oh, police just showed up just to start acting like hoodlums. They were just doing some racial profiling. They just wanted a bunch of niggers to just, yeah, right. Pool party where many of the guests were uninvited. And as typically tends to happen when you get Negroes coming into some little social function, which they were not, excuse me. So anytime there's some little social function that's going on where a certain group of Negroes have not been formally invited and show up anyway, as what typically happens in such situations, somebody gets to fighting. And then some little mob violence starts to happening, and then the people of this neighborhood, and it was a very nice looking neighborhood too, and I'm looking at this whole thing, and I'm shaking my head, and I'm just saying to myself, it's no damn wonder white flight exists. It's no damn wonder white folk try their damnedest to get the hell away from us, and as soon as we start to encroach upon their territory, what they perceive as their territory, they take up stakes and uproot themselves, and they go on over to the next destination. So now what they're doing is they figure out, hell, too many damn niggers are coming to the damn suburbs. Let's go down to these blighted communities. Let's take over these urban areas, which are all dilapidated. Let's build them back up, and let's move back into the urban centers where everything is in the first place. And we just don't figure it out. We just don't get it. We just keep this vicious circle going on and on and on and on, and we never wake the F up. And we keep losing as a result of it. But here we go. What appeared to be a very decent suburban neighborhood. I'm only going, again, based upon what I saw in the video. I'm not bothering to do any digging deep or anything, and if I remember correctly, I think McKinley, Texas is one of your nicer communities. If I'm not mistaken, I did a 2-year stint in the state of Texas in the Galveston area, so I learned a little bit about some of the different areas and what all, and And I think McKinney is one of those places where you kind of have to be a little bit on your A game or at least your B game in order to really fit in. If I'm mistaken about that, then I'm sure somebody will correct me, or maybe I'll find out about it later myself. If I decide to, I want to do a little bit more in-depth research about the community and all that other mess. But be it as it may, based upon what we saw in the video, nice looking community. Clearly a suburban community. But then here are all these Negroes just flocking and flooding the place, and all this stink and all this chaos that's just taking place in there because somebody decided they wanted to show up where they weren't invited to, started acting a bunch of hoodlums, and then instead of just saying, well, hey, let's save our necks or let's save our skins, we're not involved in this mess, the police are telling us to disperse, let's do the smart thing and disperse. Or at the very least, go across the street. We can continue to document everything on our little cell phone cameras or whatever the heck that's going on. Stay away from that. Let them take care of the riffraff. Let them chase the people down. Let them throw people to the ground. Let them tell them to stay sitting in the grass. And, oh, if you get up and you move away from the grass, and we're going to grab you and we're going to take you down to the, you know, little simplistic stuff. Now, I try to give this situation a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Just a little smidgen of the benefit of the doubt, because these were, for the most part, teenagers. And we know how teenagers get. We've been there. So there's a little bit of understanding there. But my problem with that is, well, teenagers or not, they should have known better, number one. But if they didn't know better, or if they felt that it wasn't their place to know better, guess whose fault that is? That's right, that falls right back into the lap of the parents who never bothered to sit them down and teach them and tell them, look, when you're in these situations, don't exacerbate the situation beyond what it's already happening. You are already black, that's one strike against you. If you're black and male, that's 2 strikes against you automatically. So why would you want to intensify a situation when the cards are already stacked against you by default? It's just a little simple question I asked, which should have a little simple answer, which is you don't want to do that. If there's a situation that involves the authorities, if there's any way to lessen it at all, go with that flow. If you're feeling that your rights are being somehow thwarted or whatever the heck it is, go with the flow until you get to the point where you can state that, look, I feel that my rights were violated or I was mistreated or yada yada. I want to file formal complaint, and oh, by the way, you'll be hearing from my attorney. But we're niggas. We don't think like that. We just have this concept that everything should just go our way because we're entitled. You know, we don't have to earn anybody's respect, just respect us on the T, you know. As long as that's our attitude, we're going to keep getting mistreated. And as long as we keep elevating people who do not deserve to be elevated in these situations, just so that we can have a little stink fest against the police officers or the corrupt police system or whatever, and we start making heroes out of people who do not deserve to be heroes, then don't be surprised that you create a monster with these police officers who have to deal with us day in and day out. And the majority of them are not even part of our community because we're too damn stupid and ignorant to realize that, hey, the best person to clean your own house is the owner of the house or the person who lives in the house. You know, we kind of like, we know where everything is. We kind of know what priorities are. We kind of know where our little nooks and crannies are in the areas that need the most attention. You know, that little inside knowledge thing that gives us the advantage. You would think that more African Americans would flock to the police force as a career move. But no, one of the problems is it doesn't pay enough. Well, you're damn right about that. But then, oh, it takes too much work, or, you know, whatever excuse. Whatever excuse. So somebody else has to pick up our tab, come into our community, supposedly our community, clean up our messes, and the first thing we do is, we want to get all belligerent with them. How dare you come to my community and try to clean up my community of the things that are making my community the hellhole that it is. You know, so we worship and idolize people like this Eric Harris idiot just because he got shot by a deputy dog Barney Fife wannabe who decided that, hey, I got money to give to the police force, I can pay to play, yeah, let me be John Wayne for a while, and then accidentally shoots this man. As I stated before, that situation could have been avoided by just not having Deputy Dog up there in the first place, and this situation would have never happened. But I ain't gonna cry no tears over Eric Harris when he got a cap popped in his ass accidentally or not. Because here you got this guy whining and complaining after he gets a little plug in him. He shot me! He shot me! I didn't do shit! Oh, you didn't do shit, huh? So let me see. Why are you whining and crying, talking about, I didn't do shit, he shot me, and then you end up coughing your last breath out of that, and then people want to make a hero out of this monster. They say, oh, you shot another black man. Well, first of all, he wasn't unarmed, was he? Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't he a gun runner? And a gun-running meth addict at that? With his little crack whore or meth whore white woman that does. Yeah, I didn't hear anybody talk about his little meth addict white girl or white bitch, as y'all want to say. I didn't hear anybody complaining about that situation. Oh, messing around with the white girls, man. Gee, how come I didn't hear anybody talking about that? You always want to talk about how brothers are leaving the sisters for these white trash girls and all stuff. I didn't hear nobody say anything about Eric Harris and his white gal. Two meth heads, two meth addicts involved in criminal activity that could prove deadly. Because see, while this ex-con was running around crying the blues about himself getting shot and then garnering everybody's sympathy, well, excuse me, but where's the sympathy for what could have possibly been his potential victim? Because he's running illegal guns. We don't know whose hands that gun could have came into if it had not gotten into the police officer's hands. So here's an illegal weapon out there going to God knows who are going to use it for God knows what, and somebody's innocent life, or guilty life, whichever, we don't know what the situation would have been, but somebody's life would have been lost as a result of this idiot, this clown, this ex-con, distributing illegal weapons to somebody. Somebody could have become a murder victim or a manslaughter victim as a result of that. But ain't nobody thinking about crying tears for a potential victim of this criminal ex-con who's running the guns that could have caused that loss of life, are they? No, they rather cry tears and boo-hoo and sing the blues over an ex-con who was distributing death, who ended up getting killed by himself. Inappropriately, granted, but again, why are you shedding tears for this monster? Why am I supposed to feel sympathy for somebody who's distributing death, and more than likely in my community, or my supposed community, So, he's the good guy. This bad man, this ex-con, this dopehead who peddles death in the form of a firearm, nope, he's the victim. Because, see, he got shooted by a police officer. So that just automatically, by default, makes him the innocent victim. And it's the same way with this Walter Scott person. Now, granted, the more research I did into Walter Scott, I have to acknowledge that the man has a little bit more of a tragic life about himself. From the surface of it, it would appear that this was the case of a good guy getting a bump deal. Now, he may have been a good guy all in well, but his actions kind of belied him, don't you think? I mean, here's this, responsibility-dodging coward, essentially, who would rather run from the cops than, well, even if he didn't pay child support, but if he at least acknowledged it and just went through the system and said, hey, look, I'm in a situation right now. I can't foot the entire bill right now. Or maybe he could have called, what's his name in Atlanta, Georgia, and said, hey, I think maybe this isn't the fairest system. I'd like to know if there's a way I can challenge this so I don't have to pay it, or that, something other than just running like a little bitch coward. Challenge it, would appeal the situation, write some letters, talk to some people, do something, at least keep the wheels going. Do like these corporations do, drag that shit out. When they get a judgment against them, by the time they get a judgment against them, a whole decade might have passed by, then a judgment against them, then they just go through the appeals process, drag it out for another 2 decades. Why can't we do the same thing? Just say, hey, we don't think that this is a fair or an appropriate decision. We want to renegotiate this thing, or we want to put it on the back burner for a while. We want to acknowledge that you think that we're responsible for this stuff, but we just don't feel that we want to contribute anything to it right now because we think that this is an unfair assessment, that we want to challenge it in court. How? Well, it's not simple. But it's a lot simpler than trying to stay 2 or 3 steps ahead of the police, and every time you get stopped or pulled over or observed or something, then you got a darn ricochet rabbit sort of a thing. But, okay, trying to look at it from his perspective. I mean, this guy was a in arrears of child support, and he wanted to avoid child support because he was having a hard time. Well, nobody's going to knock you for having a hard time. Go through the motions and say, hey, here's my situation. I'm in a situation where I can't really take care of myself. I just got this job, and I'm trying to work myself out of my little indebted situation and whatnot, and I just got this card for my work and all this other mess. And I'm like, things about this story just keep not adding up. Because, okay, here's this man who's not able to pay child support. Okay, let's say I give him that. And just agree that, okay, well, by the time this thing had happened, he had just started this job, or he was just relatively new in the job, and I don't know, I guess maybe he's trying to build up his reserves or something. I've got no problem with that. But for a man who has no money, oh, he's able to buy this Mercedes-Benz. Well, granted, it was a used car, and the way that it was explained was that the vehicle that he did have prior to this pretty much broke down, and he needed a new car to get to work. And this is an old Mercedes, too, so it's not like he really went out and tried to get something really flashy or anything of that sort and whatnot. And I'm like, well, okay, that sounds all well and good. Get yourself a little used car, and it's a good quality car, so you don't have to worry about it breaking down on you, because Mercedes are known for their quality and all that good happy stuff. And I'm like, yeah, okay, fine, I can give you a little bit of acceptance for that. But then we start hearing talk about rims, and I don't know if they talked about putting any other details on it or not. I didn't delve that deeply into it, but I do remember hearing about that they wanted to put some rims on it, or he was putting rims on it, or he had gotten rims for it, or something along those lines. And to me, that's like, well, that's showing off financial irresponsibility, don't you think? You've got your priorities in a little bit different, situation again, where I'm like, hey, you're in arrears on your child support. I think the last thing you want to be thinking about or worrying about are rims on your car. But here's the other question that nobody else seems to be raising or even bothering to question. For all this money that this man did not have, and that he started making money, and the first thing he does, he goes out and he buys himself a new ride, used ride, but to him it's new. And I'm like, this man is like 50 years old now, dad of 4, so I think I don't know if he's paying back child support, or if he's just paying child support for the one child that still hasn't reached the age of majority yet. Those details, I don't know, I really don't care. I want to look at the bigger picture here, which is during all this time, during all these ins and outs, during all these periods of ups and downs, and having to deal with having this burden of child support placed on the back of his back and all this mess, he still managed to attract some desperate, some love-starved black woman who didn't care that he was in arrears of child support. He didn't mind that he was like she was going to be his third wife, I think it was. And it's like, okay, he didn't have a job, and they were living together. So let me see. Black man, 50 years old, 4 children, not paying child support, no car or bust-down car, and who is giving this man a place to stay? A man with no money and no job, who's feeding him? Well, apparently, according to all the information that's out there that I've been able to dig up, she was. Miss New Engagement, I'm engaged to be wife number 3 or whatever it is. Prior to all this engagement and everything, they were all living together. They were just one big happy family, and like, okay, so she's taking care of his food, she's taking care of his shelter, she's taking care of his clothes, I'm sure. When he finally decided to get a job, okay, so he needs a new car, or he needs a reliable car. So question is, if Sugar Mama here is taking care of all his other life incidences, his baths and cleaning supplies, his food, his shelter, probably put gas in his car, the one that he did have that broke down. So why couldn't this woman, who admittedly spoiled him like a baby, these are her own words, or let me backtrack on that. I can't remember exactly if those were her words or if these are the words of his family who saw their interaction and equated it as him being spoiled like a baby. But either way, everybody knew that she was waiting on this man hand and foot, who had nothing to himself, wasn't doing anything for himself, but she's waiting on him hand and foot. So if she's doing all that stuff already, then why wasn't she the one to buy the car for him? You know, why is it that when he finally got a job, or decided to get a job, whatever the situation was, or needed to get a job because, I don't know, child support keeps breathing on his neck, whatever the reason. But when it came time for him to get a new car, or a reliable car, or something like that, why didn't he knock on old Sugar Mama's door and say, hey honey, I need more reliable form of transportation to get back and forth to work? Considering all that she had done for him up to this point, it's highly unlikely that she would have said no. But no, he had to go and buy a car and put rims on it. Oh, wait a minute, that's not what happened, is it? At least that's not what he told the police officer, because when he was stopped by the police officer, Michael Slager, and Michael Slager asked him for his license, his proof of insurance, and his registration. What did our boy Walter Scott say? I don't have the registration and I don't have the insurance for his car. It's not my car. I'm buying the car from a neighbor. So all that necessary paperwork, the registration, insurance, all that good happy stuff, it's with the neighbor that I'm buying the car from. Note, buying. But he says, I'm in the process of buying the car. But yet he told his family that he had already bought the car and that he was putting rims on it, or that he had just put rims on it. So which was it? Was he in the process of buying the car, or had he already bought the car? He told Officer Slager that the car was not his. He was in the process of buying the car. So it was not at the time his car. But Walter Scott's brother, in interview after interview, said that Walter Scott had already purchased the car and may have put rims on it at the time. But he's talked about his brother Walter Scott bragging about rims. So he could have had them on at the time. He might not have had them on, but was in the process of getting the rims. We don't know. Well, at least I don't know. So the question is, which was it? Was it the car is mine, as he told his brother and his family? Or was it the car's not mine, as he told Officer Slager? Either way, he lied to somebody. What's that old saying? God don't like liars. And yet, here's a man who falls behind on his child support or doesn't take care of his children, who's lying to somebody about what he's doing, and is not man enough to be a man, but to live up under some woman's heel, to have her take care of him and every bit of his needs. And here he goes parading around with this big glory hallelujah t-shirt, trying to show how much of a Christian he is, saying, when I can't cope, Jesus offers hope. Well, Jesus sure didn't teach you about anything such as Romans 13:1, where it said, be in subjection to the superior authorities, which can translate into, don't run from the police. You sure didn't take to heart 1 Timothy 5:8, which says, quote, certainly, if anyone does not provide for those of his own, i.e. his family, he has disowned the faith and is worse than a person without faith, unquote. And of course, we all know about the Ten Commandments, the one that says, thou shalt not bear false witness. In other words, don't tell a lie. And yet, here's a man who not only tells lies, but refuses to be in subjection to the superior authorities, and refuses to be the man of the house, because according to the Bible now, the man is supposed to be the provider of the family, not the woman. And because he's shirking his child support responsibilities, he's not providing for his own children, or he's making excuses for not providing for them. And yet we're supposed to feel sympathy for this guy because, oh, he was an unarmed black man that got shot in the back. Oh yeah, that's right, he was an unarmed black man that got shot in the back after struggling for a police officer's taser, after first fleeing. You know, this guy is looking less and less innocent as we go along, though, isn't he? So let's look at something that that really ought to tell you something about this man and about his character. For all these hard luck stories that we hear about this guy, for everything that they say, that, you know, how good of a person he was and how he was just down on his luck and how he was trying to get his life back in order and how he needed to just pull himself up and he was in the process of doing this, that, and the other. There's another little side story that nobody is really hearing a lot about, or I haven't heard discussed in very many circles. In fact, I haven't heard it discussed at all. Come to think of it, as far as I know, I'm the only person who's even bringing this up in a commentary form. But here's another little dirty little thing about our good friend here, Walter Scott, that nobody else seems to be really paying any real attention to. And of course, when we look at it, naturally, and from my perspective, it's for good reason nobody's paying any attention to it or nobody's focusing upon it. Because it speaks volumes, again, about his character. Because this man with no money, who can't pay for his child support, who can't find work, or he can't get work, or he can't keep steady work, or whatever it is, and he's living off of some woman at 50 years old, trying to make a third wife out of her, who runs from the police because he can't pay his child support, who's, you know, such a good person that, you know, he'd never done anything wrong to anybody. He always comes to family functions, and he's always the life of the party, all this good happy-do-dah stuff. But, you know, he's just down and out, and he can't help it, and he just needs to get his own life in order before he can help his kids. I want to keep focusing on that. Help his kids, pay his child support, be there for his kids, provide for his kids, money for his kids. Kids. You know, Mr. Christian, you know, those who do not provide for their own is worse than one without faith. You know, you ain't got no money for your own family, for your own offspring. Yet, shortly after this man started his new job, which he was bragging about, talking about, yeah, I finally got a new job and all this hoopity-doo-dah stuff, a person he knew for barely a month or two, a co-worker, a total stranger, Walter Scott decides to befriend this man, and out of his money that he did not have for his own family or for his own children or for his own well-being, takes $100 of his money that he doesn't have, right? Because remember, the whole idea was he didn't have money for this, that, and the other, and the blah, 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 blah. Well, he managed to come up with $100 to give to this co-worker that he didn't know from Adam's house cat, that he only knew barely a month or two, and said, here, I'm going to give you, not loan, I'm going to give you $100, and for what purpose? So that this new friend of his could actually address some situation that he himself was to be presenting himself up in court with. So here's a man who's supposed to be in court himself, trying to renegotiate his child support assessment, chooses instead to help somebody else's court case out by giving them $100 free and clear after having landed a new job, and he doesn't know this man from anybody. Or I don't know, I guess maybe it was because it was the Christian thing to do, you know, help a neighbor out in need. But wait a minute. The apostles said that if you don't help your own out in need, first and foremost, then you're essentially worse than somebody without faith then. You've disowned the faith. Because you won't even take care and provide for your own, but you're going to help somebody else out who is not your own. Total stranger. Not to say that it's not a good gesture, but you've got responsibilities in your own home, and you're shirking them, and you're ducking them, and you're dodging them, and you're running from the police because of them. And I'm supposed to feel sympathy for this clown because he got shot in the back while he was running away? Well, granted, again, he shouldn't have gotten shot in the back while he was running away because he was barely sprinting, because apparently it looked like maybe he had gotten tased before he started running off, and it was affecting him somewhat. We don't know the full story about that either. But we know that he was interfering with the tase, that much is certain. And of course we know he was interfering with the tase because he was interfering with himself being arrested. Instead of just saying, hey, come into the station, well, I'd like to talk to you. No, he decides to pull a ricochet rabbit and just starts taking off. And then whether he got tased or whether he was going to get tased and he fought trying to get tased and tried to wrestle the taser from the officer, either way, that was a bad move on his part. So whatever happened after that, yes, Officer Slager did wrong. He could have just as easily chased them down, threw them to the ground, all that other good stuff. But Walter Scott decided to create a monster. Rather than thinking in terms of, let me cooperate with my fellow human being, no, I'm going to turn this thing from Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde. And it ain't gonna look pretty when it happens. So Walter Scott owns that one himself. So whose fault was it that Walter Scott got shot in the back? Not Officer Slager's fault. Officer Slager only essentially gave Walter Scott what Walter Scott was in effect begging for. Not saying it was right that what happened, not saying it was a good thing that happened, but I am saying that Walter Scott decided that that's the way he wanted to go out, that's how he went out. Because the final choice was his and his alone. So no, I don't feel sympathy for Walter Scott. When all things are tabulated and formulated and compiled, Walter Scott, despite what anybody else who knew him says, based upon the way that he behaved, Walter Scott was not a good person. He was not a good person. He was not a good person. So no, I don't feel sympathy for him when he got a cap plugged in his ass, which unfortunately and sadly resulted in his untimely death. But had he been a good person, he would have never, one, gotten shot, because he would have never, two, struggled for a taser, because he would have never, three, been put in a situation to where he was going to get tased, because four, he would have never run from a police officer, because five, he would have just taken his lickings like a man. And when it became apparent that, hey, you've got some outstanding warrants on you, man up. Well, the smart thing to do, the manly thing to do, the Christian thing to do would have simply been to man up. And he would have still been alive, and he would have still been the life of everybody's party and all this other good happy doo-dah stuff which everybody just loved him for. And he wouldn't be making news headlines post-mortem. Are we beginning to see a pattern here? So, the same thing with, let's focus on this Freddie Gray character. Another so-called innocent black man who, just got killed by the racist police. This poor innocent black man who, again, everybody wants to talk about, this happy-go-lucky 27-year-old ladies man who just caused the girlies to just fall all over themselves because of his swag, and that he just made everybody smile, and he was just always, let me see. So this good, decent, upstanding citizen, yeah. So let me see. What's some things about this good, happy-go-lucky Freddie Gray character that we really need to delve a little bit deeper into? Well, first and foremost, of course, he was a dope peddler. Dope peddler. Isn't that illegal? Isn't that against the law? I mean, you're peddling in illicit dope, and what did he peddle? Oh, he just distributed a little bit of weed. He just dealt with some little bit of weed. Nobody make a big fuss about a little bit of weed. Okay. Let's say that, the war on marijuana is one of those touchy situations where, it's not such a big deal. Well, but I say, as a teenager, I saw fellow teenagers who were big on they just smoked a little pot, man. They just did a little weed. Weed don't hurt you. Weed don't cause cancer, but it sure eats your fucking brain cells, let me tell you that. Because I've seen plenty of white boy as a teenager. Weed, smoke, toke. You cannot tell me that stuff didn't screw up with their brain cells. So little bit weed is not dangerous. Don't try to play this thing about, ain't nothing wrong with it, don't hurt nobody. Yes, it does. I've seen it. But okay, since everybody wants to take that as an exception, it's like, well, it's just a little bit of weed, it's just some herb, man. Ain't gonna, big. Okay, fine. So he peddled a little herb. Whoopee. Maybe not a life sentence out of that. But turns out that he also used to deal in smack. Isn't that what they call heroin, smack, white horse? That stuff that'll really eat you alive? Yeah. And I kind of wonder, where do you suppose he got the idea to peddle in a hard illicit drug such as smack? Could it possibly be because it was his mommy's favorite? Oh yeah, let's not overlook the fact that this loving son that Michael Gray was so loving and so respectful of his dear old mommy that he decided to peddle in the very drug that was responsible for ruining her life, which by extension ruined his life because everybody talked about how he didn't have this best upbringing. He had his unfortunate childhood and the lead paint and oh yeah, and let's talk about that too. The lead paint. I went to somebody's some discussion page. No, actually it was a Washington Post article, and I was reading in the discussion articles where they were talking about this Freddie Gray character and how, like you said, look at the guy. He's not exactly the most positive role model out there. I had made some kind of statement in response to somebody, and so commenter was trying to make that point, and me being the sarcastic dickhead that I usually am, tried to drop a comment. It's like, how dare you? Don't you realize that he had a bad upbringing. He grew up in the hood. He didn't have the best opportunities available to him. So really, it's not his fault. Little snotty, sarcastic comment like that, like I'm known to make. And somebody came up behind me and said, they made the comment. It's like, well, no, what we need to do is we need to blame the lead paint for his problems. That's the real genesis of his problems, was the lead paint in his house. And I was about to come back with like a little thumbs up type of comment on that until I came across an article in the same newspaper, and I'll be dog blasted. Sure enough, this article is focusing on the lead paint, and it's blaming the lead paint. I'm like, how in the world do you do this? For everything that Freddie Gray did in his life to mess his own life up, they're going to put the blame not on the fact that he was a dope peddler. They're not going to put the blame on the fact that with the award money, the settlement money that he and his family got because of the lead paint in his house, which they believe affected his developmental capacity, that rather than taking that money and putting it away into a trust fund for himself in order to further his education or to get some job training or something so that he could do what he keeps telling everybody that he was planning on doing at 27 years old, that he was going to get out of the hood, he was going to get out of that environment, he was going to better himself. But instead of taking that settlement money and applying it for his education, whether formal education or for vocational education, something to better himself, to actually help him get out of the hood, which he kept telling everybody, I'm going to get out, I'm going to get out, I'm getting out of this, I'm going to get out, man. Yeah, I'm going to get out of here. But with the money that would actually have helped him to get out of that situation, did he use it for that purpose? No. He used it to buy more dope that he could keep peddling and for his swag that the ladies love so much. So rather than tuition to Howard University or to go to Miller Mott Institute or even, God forbid, University of Phoenix, but something to help me better myself, to help me to step out of the hood like I want to get stepped out, like I say I want to get stepped out. No, instead of using that money for his education or to maybe try to get a group of people together and invest in our community, let's start our own business sort of a thing. No. His idea of, hey, this settlement money is for my betterment, for my benefit, so the way to better and benefit myself is to go buy Prada. I got to keep my swag up. And I'm supposed to feel sympathy for this person who's a dope peddler, peddling even in the very drug that got his mom strung out, and he's going to take whatever settlement money from the debilitating effects of lead paint, which people believe that was what didn't make him the brightest bulb in the room, but it sure didn't stop that bulb from being bright enough to realize that, hey, when the police come after me, I got 2 feet, I better run. Shout, bing, bing, bing. Huh? So it didn't eat those brain cells, did it? I mean, he's able to rationalize and he's able to put all those synapses firing in enough, but no. Not according to this article in the Washington Post. Nope, the Washington Post says, he's a victim of lead paint because it messed with his cognitive abilities or it messed with his abilities to, and I'm like, I had no response anymore. I mean, the person made the comment as a joke. But the article writer in the Washington Post did not see it as a joke. In fact, that was the thing that excused Freddie Gray from any personal responsibility. And you wonder why I always huff and say niggas. So, I don't know. What more, it just makes my head hurt. But these are the people we elevate. These are the people that we idolize. These are our heroes. These are the people that we make excuses for. You know, I don't get it. And you know, to make matters worse, when we have black people in the community who really do give a shit, who really do give a damn, like Terminator Mom or whatever title that they're giving this woman. This black woman saw that her teenage son was getting involved in all this rowdy behavior, acting in a way that was destructive, that would have eventually ended up putting him in jail or possibly getting him hurt by a police baton or something of that sort. But she said that, look, I'm going to save you from the long arm of the law, and I'm going to introduce you to the long arm of motherhood. This is parenting in action. Before a police gets to wrap you upside your head, I'm going to wrap you upside your head. Because that's what this is leading up to. This is why all this mess is going on right now, because some ignorant ass fool decided that they thought of getting a beating by the police or getting a shot put in them by the police or anything, some violent action by the police was more credible than just staying out of the nonsense, protecting yourself, and letting the chips fall where they may with somebody else. I don't want that for you, so I'm going to beat your ass before any police officer has a chance to beat your ass. And this young man saw the wisdom of what his mother was trying to do, exercising parental responsibility, trying to keep him out of harm's way. He knew, he understood, and he loved her for it. Still embarrassed the hell out of him, but he ultimately recognized that she only did this because she loved me and she wanted to keep me out of harm's way. But some black nigger bitch, again, writing an op-ed piece or some kind of article for the Washington Post, again, lambasted this responsible, concerned black mother for saving her young black son's life. She is actually appalled that anybody would make this black mother, this responsible black mother, a hero for saving her young black son's life. Because her whole attitude is, F the police. And that this mother's actions were seen as a way of reinforcing into her son's mind, well, just be the policeman's bitch and just take whatever the policeman gives you, take anything that white folk give you. Just, you know, the man is always going to keep you down, so just kowtow to the man and let him put his foot on your head. That ain't absolutely nothing at all to do with anything that this woman was doing to try to keep her son out of trouble. But you get some black nigger bitch, who hates black people so much, who hates young black men so much, that she would tell black mothers, single black mothers especially, don't discipline your young black boys. Don't force them to become black men, responsible black men, law-abiding black men who will end up saving the community if we just steer them in the right direction. Because if we don't have a man in the house, that doesn't mean that we're impotent and that we can't provide some direction ourselves. So let's get these young black boys to become the men that they should be, rescue our community, make it something to where we don't have to worry about how the police look at us anymore, because we're going to do ourselves right and we're going to do things according to the things that are going to actually push us in the right direction so that nobody will have to worry about us. We won't have to worry about the next generation. But remember, as I said in my commentary about the confessions of a black woman basher, it's always a black woman that's responsible for the destruction of the black community. Because black women do not want us to be a responsible community, because that means in order for us to become a responsible community, we have to make black men out of black boys. And to make black men, we have to make proper black men who will take the burden upon themselves, carry the responsibility, and put forth the action that's necessary to rescue the black community from the quagmire that it's in. Black women don't want that. And in this comment, in this Washington Post article, this nigger bitch, as I'm going to keep calling her, because she's not black. She doesn't want to be black. She hates black people. She hates black women, and clearly and obviously and apparently she despises black men. Otherwise, she wouldn't dare even think about making such a comment or writing such an article that essentially destroys the image of responsible black parenthood. But nobody's going to call her out, though, are they? Nope, because whatever excuse there is, if there's a black victim, it's always the white man's fault. If anything happens bad in our community, well, blame the white man, or blame his power structure, blame his police force, blame his politics, blame his corporate business model, blame his anything and everything. And so, where do we go? What do we do? So we're teaching each successive generation of black people to have disrespect for your society, disrespect for your community, disrespect for the laws of the land, disrespect for decency, courtesy, disrespect for responsibility, disrespect for anything positive. And as often as you can, show your disrespect. Act out. Be a nigger. Breed chaos and cause see, it ain't enough for a bunch of stupid-ass white kids to go around and tearing shit up and tearing their communities up and crashing and bashing and burning and looting because our football team lost. Or worse yet, because our football team won. It's not enough to let white people be the stupid idiots when it comes to being destructive in their behavior over some stupid shit. Like my sports team lost or my sports team won. So let's just go and just totally tear up our businesses in our downtown areas and just act all rowdy and tear down the light poles and turn cars over and set things aflame and go bash businesses and loot. Same thing you niggers do. But at least the white folks do it for something totally stupidiotic. And you ain't got enough sense to just say, hey, let white folk be white folk. Let them go act crazy. Let them let food. Let them be the problem that the police force has to take care of and that they have to deal with on whatever basis that they have to deal with them on. Let's be shining beacons on the hill and stark contrast to their madness. Because white folks are crazy, see? And that's proof that white folks are crazy. Let's just stand back, let's just enjoy the show, and let's just watch white folks being crazy white folks. And let the police have a field day with them. And we're not going to do anything and at all to cause any kind of negative attention to us and to our situation, because we're going to be better than that. We're going to be on a higher plane than that. We are going to be shining examples of positivity, of decency, of honor, and of respect. Now see, that's what thinking black people would think. But no, we got to one up the white folk. It's like I said, it's not enough for crazy-ass white folk to be crazy-ass white folk and tear their shit up. But we got to put some legitimacy behind it when we do it. And so what we latch on to is police brutality. Oh, it's the police hate us, the police don't like us, so get belligerent with the police and give ourselves a reason for the police to crack our skulls open. Because we're going to get belligerent with them when they ain't paying the first damn bit of attention to us at all, except when they have to come into our community and try to clean up our mess because we won't do it ourselves. But even if that's the case, it's like, look, let the police do their jobs. Let them deal with the nigger element of the black community. Get them out of the way, even if you don't like it, even if it bothers you that, oh, white police officers are coming in and getting black people out of that. Let them. Leave them alone. Let them do their job. And after a while, you know what will happen? Black folk start getting the message, and it's like, hey, police are coming in our community. They're cleaning all this mess up. Two things are going to happen. One, the criminal element is going to say, fuck this. Let me go over to that crazy-ass white community and cause a struggle and strife and rife over there in their community, since they're coming into our community, buying up our drugs and our dope anyway. Let's just make it easier for them. Let's just go to their community, hang out on their street corners, and we'll go to them instead of having them come to us. Because if they come to us, police are just going to come swarm swooping in. They're going to snatch us out of here as soon as they see us. And so that's one element of it, possibly. But the other element of it also is the good, decent people of the community are going to start feeling safer when they walk the streets. They're going to say, hey, I can ride my bike up and down the street. I don't have to worry about anybody trying to push anything on me or trying to peddle anything to me or trying to shove a switchblade in my face or anything of that sort. I'm good. Again, as I said, that's what we would do if we were smart. But problem is, we're not smart. Rather than just let crazy-ass white folk be crazy-ass white folk and let them destroy their own communities over some crazy-ass stupid nonsense and BS and just head straight out of the ass, what the F were they thinking in order to get all chaotic over something like that? Let them go ahead and shoot up the movie theaters. Let them go ahead and storm whatever federal building there is and just start blowing the place up and dropping grenades and whatever. Let crazy white folk do crazy white folk shit. And let their white police force handle that crazy white folk stuff. Let's stay out of the limelight. Let's just take a step back. It's like, that ain't us. We don't do that crazy ass mess. We're better than that. We're all about positivity. We're all about making sure that we don't fall into chaos like that. Yeah, sure, we might have to struggle and to get by, and we have to put forth the extra effort, but we're going to win this thing, and we're going to take over, and we're just going to, and on the grand scale of things, white people are going to be the minority within the next 25 years anyway, so we're just going to let the door swing, just the way it is, and we're just going to stay out of it, and we're just going to let all that stuff implode, and we're going to build ourselves up. Nope. As they say in our family, that's too much like right. We can't expect the best from ourselves because it takes too much work, it takes too much time, it takes too much effort. It requires us to be better people. And it requires this thing called being responsible. And niggas do not like responsibility. So we worship the irresponsible. We'll defend and support people of crappy character, often of criminalistic character, just because it's easier to point the finger of blame at white folk and saying it's their fault. They're the reason that we're in the situation that we're in right now, and it's their police force that's keeping us in a situation like that. And you think people in law enforcement and in the police system, you think that they take pleasure out of having to deal with that mentality, with that mindset, and always on their guard, having to worry about whether or not they have to be concerned about they might get assaulted or physically abused or something because they have to come into our community to deal with this nonsense, knowing damn well that they're not wanted? You think that doesn't mess with these people's psyches? You think that doesn't totally stress them the F out? You think that does not turn them into the monsters that you perceive them to be? And that sometimes it actually does turn them into actual monsters? Just as I was using the example of the horse thief that went and took these police officers on a stroll through a desert. Now here's an example of a white guy getting a heavy dose of police brutality, which is why nobody in the black community caused a riot against him or threw any sort of thing or started screaming police brutality when his story came about, because he's a white boy, see? And it doesn't matter when white boys are the victims of police brutality. Police brutality is subjective. It's only police brutality in the minds of black people when it happens against a black person. But when it happens to a white boy like Frank Prusak, Frank who? Nobody even knows his name. How many people even know of the story or knows what led up to the story? Here's white boy again for the people who are talking about police brutality. Only in this case, it's actually white folks screaming about it. Where are the black folk getting behind on this one? White folk came in when Freddie Gray and Eric Harris and what's that thug's name? Michael Brown. White folk came out in support for these thugs and these hoodlums and these people of less than ideal character when they were being called victims of police brutality. White folk came out and drove in support of y'all. So where's your support for white folk when one of theirs is the victim of police brutality? Oh, that's right, because he's white. Can you say double standard? There was no black outrage when Frank Prusak was getting his butt beat after he himself supposedly, the police extending they're abusing their authority. Well, the police would not have abused their authority if, number one, old Frankie boy had not involved himself with criminal activity because he was being served a warrant for identity theft. One of the worst and most destructive crimes that there is. And yet, he decided that, nope, I'm busted, but I don't want to man up either. So I'm gonna take off, zoom, took off in his car ran out of gas, it crashed or some mess of that sort, took off on foot, came across some people with some horses, horse jacked somebody, then took the horse off into the middle of the desert, police officers tracking him in the desert, running after him. Reportedly, one of the police officers got kicked in the head by the horse. Several of the police officers during this chase fell out from heat exhaustion because of a foot chase through the desert. So when old Frankie boy fell off the horse and then got tased as a result of it, and a whole swarm of police officers came in and started beating the snot out of him, police brutality or not, Frankie boy was asking for it. Again, by what he had done, by the situations that he had put the police officers in, he essentially was asking for that ass whooping. Even though it was wrong on the part of the police officers. But as I say again, do you not expect these people to turn into Mr. Hyde after you continue to push them down that path? You know, Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. Do we understand? You can either have David Banner by cooperating and by making things as non-stressful as you possibly can, or you can keep stressing the police out and turn them into the Incredible Hulk. Just like this scene. This is starting to pick up another situation that's starting to make news now. It's an old story apparently, but it's just starting to get the light of day because of all this stuff about police brutality and the police beating up on people needlessly and just showing how ugly and nasty and monstrous that they are. Watch this clip for a moment and tell me what your initial gut reaction is when you watch this.
Coming up on the...
Now you see it. And this is where it's going to end, right here. They nudged him. Now watch it.
Now, if anybody were to actually witness that, what they had just seen, there's no way imaginable that anybody can walk away from that and saying that what the police did there, you know, I don't even have to say it. It speaks for itself. It speaks loudly and it speaks in volumes. You know, this is a classic example of show, don't tell, because this whole sequence just said everything that needed to be said about the extreme degree that the police went to in order to subdue this individual. But now the question is raised, is that the whole story? Is there possibly anything that this person, this so-called victim, could have done that could have even slightly elicited such a response and such a reaction from these police officers who went in to beat an unconscious man into further unconsciousness? Well, let's take a quick look at what had happened immediately prior to this so-called victim's wipeout.
Breaking news. This is coming into us. You may have heard, I was sharing some of this with Kira just a little while ago. We're getting our hands on this piece of tape now. Watch it with me. It's going to make you shudder. We're going to warn you from the onset. It's very graphic.
Up on the spike throw. Watch this. Watch this.
And that's what he's in jail for right there, for running over that officer.
Suddenly, the police officers don't look like such bad guys now after all, do they? Still not to excuse them by not saying that what they did still wasn't wrong, and that yes, it borders on evil. But look at what this individual tried to do. And keep in mind that this was still all part of an extended period of time police chase, wherein this individual was fleeing, resisting, refusing to stop, and therefore sent police on this wild goose chase in the first place. So already you made enemies with them. So this clown only upped the ante. And so it was, I got my hand to my ear and I'm listening. Say it again. his own fault. Bad cop, yes, but no, I'm not going to outright condemn them. I'm not going to defend them, but I'm not going to hate them for it either. Just as I will not defend or support this so-called victim of their so-called police brutality. Which in this case, it really wasn't so-called police brutality, it was police brutality, but who brought it upon themselves? Had he done exactly what he was supposed to have done, none of this would have ever happened. And none of us would have been hearing the first, second, third, or eighth thing about it. That's just how it goes. Oh, and I noticed black folk didn't come out in support for this so-called victim either. You know, another clear example of police brutality in action. Where you black folks at? Oh, I'm sorry, that's right, it's a white boy again. Damn that racism that only works in one direction, supposedly. Only white people can be racist, isn't that what we hear all the time? Black people can't be racist. And yet white folk came out of the woodwork in support of your so-called victims. But you can't come out of the woodwork in support of theirs, even though the principle is the same, supposedly, police brutality. Well, you can't use them as the same example because that guy and that other guy that was in the Arizona desert, they just got beat. We're upset about police brutality in the black community because Black Lives Matter and these are black people who died and police had killed them and murdered them and they're dead. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but Rodney King did not die either, did he? I mean, the last time I checked, nobody pays attention to Rodney King. Yeah, this is the guy that everybody makes fun of. It's like, oh, can't we all just get along? That's Rodney King, so he don't matter, see. Yeah, do you not see the hypocrisy? So here I am. I'm just stuck at this whole thing where everything has to be black people victim, white police officers perpetrators. Even in a situation with this Eric Harris guy, not Eric Harris, Walter Scott, where everybody wants to talk about the white police and white police brutality, and the conspiracy of the white police officers trying to protect themselves, and because the white police officer shot an innocent black man and they got him on. Well, wait a minute. So there's all this cover-up and it's all this conspiracy about the big cover-up and all this other. Did anybody not see the same videos that it's really difficult for me to wrap my head around this stuff and ask these things because are we not watching the same documentation? First of all, that whole I'm sorry, my brain's so fried right now. I'm forgetting names now. But this whole Walter Scott thing that was part of, this white police officer just trying to kill a black man, just to be killing a black man, and they're trying to cover it up. First of all, if we all watch the same videos actually, because of course the first video came from the police dash cam, and then the second video was shot by a private citizen who happened to be black. How did that happen? So wait a minute, if there was this cover-up, like the videographer himself was trying to say, oh, I got scared, he looked in my direction, I thought he was going to come up to me and he was going to take my video away from me. First of all, I didn't get that from watching the video, number one. But number two, even if that were your true fear, if that's what he claimed was that, oh, I was afraid he was going to take my camera because he saw me shooting a black man and I got scared, I thought he was going to take my camera. Newsflash, genius. He didn't take your camera, though, did he? So what's with this bullshit about you were afraid he was going to take his camera and what about this bullshit about, it's some cover-up. The white police officer was trying to cover up. Wait, didn't we see this video shot by a young black man that showed Officer Slager wrestling with the taser and then shooting him and then looking over him to see what the situation was like and then putting his hands behind his back and handcuffing him and then walking back to where the taser was and then picking the taser up and walking back over to the body and dropping the taser on the ground. And didn't we all see that in the video that if there was going to be a cover-up, Officer Slager knows he's being videotaped, and so he's going to plant evidence by the dead or dying body just to show that, hey, he arrested my taser, so I'm going to drop the taser bomb, and this is where it happened? No, we got that on video, so how can he be planting evidence then if he knows that the whole thing was videotaped, idiot? Let me see. Let me think. Let me try to think about this stuff. Planting the videotape. Okay. So why would he drop the taser down by the body then if he wasn't planting evidence? I don't know. Maybe because he wanted to go back and retrieve the taser from lying where he had dropped it, and then decided to bring it with him, but instead of going through the motions of resetting and rewinding everything. I don't know how the mechanics of these things work, but I would assume that there's some process that you have to go through in order to reset the taser so that you recoil everything and all this other good stuff. Rather than doing that, doesn't it make more logical sense just to drop the thing where he's at and then attend to the situation with the body on the ground and figure out, oh, hey, when I've got more time, I'll get to the taser later and reset it as it should be so I can use it again for the next situation if a next situation presents itself? Does that make even a slight bit of logical sense? Maybe. But no, it's because he was there planting evidence, and he's trying to cover it up in the presence of a black police officer? Are you kidding me? Did we also miss that part? That the whole time that this was going on, that when he was examining the body, he was going back, he was getting the taser, and he brought the taser back, and he dropped the taser by the dead or dying body, that he was standing right in front, just a few feet away from a fellow police officer who happened to be black. How many heads are exploding right now? You see what happens when you use logic and reason and common sense to support your argument or to shoot down a bogus argument? And you wonder why police officers are becoming monsters in our community. Or you wonder why people like myself, who are just outside of the loop, who decide that, hey, I want to grow callous with a lot of these things that are happening. You wonder why that makes me a monster because I'm cold and insensitive and unfeeling. But if this is what we have to deal with all the time, and we always have to constantly try to bring rational logic and sense to these arguments, then it's no wonder that monsters are made in relation to these sorts of things. And that we just stop caring, and that we just turn a blind eye, or we shrug our shoulders, or worst case scenarios, we act out. It's your fault. Don't blame me for being callous and cold and insensitive and reptilian, because I tried caring once before, and I tried caring more times than that. It doesn't work. So don't ask me for any sympathy for when your people of lesser than character decide to act out. I don't care how old, how young, what genitalia they have between their legs at the time, what the circumstances were. I'm not listening anymore. I will analyze each and every situation, but don't ask me to comment on these things anymore, because more often than not, you're trying to get me to choose a side which is not deserving of being supported or having myself throwing my support behind. So don't ask me anymore. You created this monster. You deal with the consequences. End of line.
What's your response to some of the people that thought you were being disrespectful by being on your phone and not being attentive to them?
Well, I was on my phone, and yes, that's true. I was following developments with a 5-year-old little girl sitting on her dad's lap who just got shot in the head by a drive-by shooting. And if some of the people here gave a good goddamn about the victimization of people in this community by crime, I take some of their invective more seriously. The greatest racial disparity in the city of Milwaukee is getting shot and killed. Hello. 80% of my homicide victims every year are African American. 80% of our aggravated assault victims are African American. 80% of our shooting victims who survived their shooting are African American. Now, they know all about the last 3 people that have been killed by the Milwaukee Police Department over the course of the last several years. There's not one of them can name one of the last 3 homicide victims we've had in this city. Now, there's room for everybody to participate in fixing this police department, and I'm not pretending we're without sin. But this community's at risk, all right. And it's not because men and women in blue risk their lives protecting it. It's at risk because we have large numbers of high-capacity, quality firearms in the hands of remorseless criminals who don't care who they shoot. Now, I'm leaving here to go to that scene. And I take it personally, okay? We're going up there, and there's a bunch of cops processing a scene of a dead kid. And they're the ones that are going to be out there patrolling and stopping suspects that may have guns under the front seat. They're the ones that are going to take the risks of their lives to try to clean this thing up. All right? We're responsible for the things we get wrong, and we take action. We've arrested cops, we've fired cops, and so on. But the fact is that the people out here, some of them, who had the most to say, are absolutely MIA when it comes to the true threats facing this community, and it gets a little tiresome. And when you start getting yelled at for reading the updates of the kid that gets shot, yeah, you take it personally.